Greetings, everyone, and welcome. It is April the 23rd, now afternoon. If you were with me earlier, you got the breaking news that there would be no substantial talks happening in London. I stayed up late. I got some rest, and I knew that when we got going today, we would get the next wave that would be fallout from that disaster of London negotiations. So we have it. I've got it all for you, and I can just give you a little heads up. Here it is. I think this is where we're at. Yeah, how about we just start right there? The reality is, let me share with you guys again what has happened. I've got statements from many American reps, Ukrainian reps, Russian reps. I've got it all for you, and I'm going to bullet through it and get you caught up to where we are right now, currently afternoon here, late night there in Ukraine. And then we'll be back tonight live with Dylan Burns at 6 p.m. Eastern, and we'll be talking about all of this with you back and forth and seeing where we're at over the next 4 hours. Here we go. Let's jump right in. This is what started it. This one. Crimea is non-negotiable. When Zelenskyy said that yesterday and his country, his countrymen, his army backed him, that changed everything. Mr. Trump, forget it. That's when all of this unfolded. Then Rubio's not going. Of course, Witkoff's not going. We're just going to send Kellogg. And then France says, well, we're not going. London's not going. We're not coming to it's just, we're going to have some low-level meetings, and that's what's going to happen. So now Donald Trump is coming out and blasting Vladimir Zelenskyy, saying it is all his fault. Ladies and gentlemen, that is 100% lies coming out of the White House. Now, let's look at this. This is the Donald Trump statement. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy is boasting on the front page of the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine will not legally recognize the occupation of Crimea. Let's pause right there for a moment. Zelenskyy didn't send a message to the Washington Post and say, let's boast. He made a statement defending his nation and defending their sovereignty. You're the one that is just making up all of this rhetoric, Donald Trump. There's nothing to talk about here. This statement is very harmful to the peace negotiations with Russia, in that Crimea was lost years ago under the auspices of, here comes the blame game, President Barack Hussein Obama, and it's not even a point of discussion. It's not a point of discussion. They're gone. The United States is gone, guys. Nobody's asking Zelenskyy to recognize Crimea as Russian territory, but if he wants Crimea, why didn't they fight for it 11 years ago when it was handed over to Russia without a shot being fired? We'll talk about that. The area also houses, for many years before the Obama handover, major Russian submarine bases. It's inflammatory statements like Zelenskyy's that make it so difficult to settle this war. He has nothing to boast about. The situation for Ukraine is dire. He can have peace, or he can fight for another 3 years before losing the whole country. I have nothing to do with Russia. But have much to do with wanting to save, on average, now it's 5,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers a week who are dying for no reason whatsoever. Completely wrong numbers, and just makes them up. The statement made by Zelenskyy today will do nothing but prolong the killing field, and nobody wants that. We are very close to a deal, but the man with no cards to play should now finally get it done. I look forward to being able to help Ukraine and Russia get out of this complete and total mess that would have never started if I were president. Well, let me just show you this right now. This is the real look of the missiles and drones that are flying over Ukraine real time as I'm recording this video. I don't know what Trump's referring to. So here we have it. Trump placing all the guilt on Ukraine, all the guilt on Zelenskyy. We've heard it many times. They started a war with a stronger enemy. You should never do that. Then he goes into this 11 years ago. When the Russians got into Crimea and Donbass, we didn't even call the war a war because our partners, Ukrainians saying, the Americans, forbade it. We had Minsk agreements and Normandy formats, and they, meaning the Americans, wanted us to do everything not to anger Putin. Ladies and gentlemen, during that era, it was called an ATO. It was the anti-terroristic operations, not a full, like declared war. Now we have a full-scale war. But then there was action called the anti-terroristic operation. It was the United States saying, hold back, hold back, hold back. And now the world is trying to prove to Donald Trump only simple truth. And Ukraine says, Trump, just cannot accept the truth. Well, we've played that video many times. He can't handle the truth. The states declare we refuse negotiations, we sabotage them, and then they declare, well, why didn't you fight for Crimea 11 years ago? Are you kidding me?
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
That's where we're at, ladies and gentlemen. Donald Trump cannot handle the truth, and it's an absolute tragedy, travesty. It is a disaster. Now, Emmanuel Macron, here we go. I'm going to roll through the responses now. Emmanuel Macron coming out and saying any peace deal must include Ukraine's territorial integrity, says France. European countries will demand that any peace deal has to include Ukraine's territorial integrity. France's presidency has said Ukraine's territorial integrity and European aspirations are very strong requirements for Europeans. Macron. This statement follows J.D. Vance, the U.S. vice president, stating that both sides would have to give up some of the current territory they own. We'll get to that in just a few minutes. Also, Kadri Kallas coming out and making the same strong statements. EU leaders coming out and making the same strong statements. We now have a dividing of the ways unfolding between the United States and the European Union. In fact, Pete Hegseth will say something about that in just a moment. So what is Russia saying? Dmitry Peskov, the spokesman for Vladimir Putin, has come out and said within the last couple of hours, Ukraine must withdraw troops from Lugansk, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson regions to end the war. That means all of the regions. That means you leave Kherson city, you leave Zaporizhia city, you full out Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, all of that's gone. You just leave it. And then the war will end. Not going to happen. Russia will achieve its goals either through peaceful means or by force. This is the statement coming out of Moscow. Oh, by the way, did you know Witkoff is back on his airplane heading to Moscow to meet with Vladimir Putin on Friday? So we just have a failure. We scream at Donald Trump screams at Vladimir Zelenskyy. It's all your fault, all your fault. You warmonger, it's all your fault. Witkoff, go talk to Vova. Go talk to Vladimir Putin. Let's figure this thing out. Ladies and gentlemen, aren't you recognizing? I know you are. You're here, you're educated, and you're learning, and you're growing. We may not agree on everything, but we agree on most stuff, I think, the important stuff. This is an absolute disaster. The Donald Trump administration is destroying this world order. Doesn't mean the world doesn't need change and to get better in ways. But holy moly, what is going on? Zelenskyy, you want his response? He's getting on an airplane heading to South Africa. He has scheduled meetings with the president of South Africa. So he's not out crying somewhere. He's not out whining somewhere. He made his statement. These are red lines, and we were fighting for our country and our future. Now, Yermak, who was in London, he did have a meeting with Keith Kellogg. It took place. And this was the statement from Yermak. Ukraine will defend its principal positions, which are the basis of sovereignty and integrity under any conditions. So now Yermak, chief advisor to the office of the president of Ukraine, Andriy Yermak, said, yeah, this is it. I'm confirming what Zelenskyy said yesterday. It's our sovereignty. It's our territory. You can't steal our territory. Now, this is a new one, a new person. This is the Minister of the Economy. Her name is Svuridenko. It's a tough one to pronounce. What did she say? During today's meeting of the delegation of Ukraine with partners in London, we confirmed the principal position. Ukraine is ready to negotiate, but not to give up. There will be no deal that will give Russia the stronger foundations it needs to regroup and come back with more violence. A complete ceasefire on land, in the air, and at sea is a necessary first step. If Russia goes on a limited pause, Ukraine will respond in kind. Our people will not agree to a frozen conflict disguised as peace. We will never recognize the occupation of Crimea, and if NATO membership is not granted, Ukraine will need mandatory security guarantees strong enough to deter future aggressions and clear enough to ensure lasting peace. How wonderfully articulated. That's coming in from Minister of Economy. Now, let's go to some of the disastrous statements coming out of the United States. We'll first start with Pete Hegseth, who may have been nipping a little bit at the bottle. The U.S. can no longer fulfill the role of security guarantor for Europe. Here it is.
The time of the United States, here in Pennsylvania, here in our country, being the sole guarantor of European security has passed. It's long overdue. Europe has to step up military and lead.
So there you have it, guys. What are we saying here? That's the defense minister of the United States. We're out. EU, you're on your own. Oh, by the way, over here to my right, we have now new missiles incoming. Kharkiv region, Sumy region, Donetsk region, and we had the Shaheeds flying in Kirovograd and the Cherkasy region. This is all happening. I mean, it's just, hello, we're going to fight on. Witkoff's on the way to Putin, though. He'll fix it all, of course. Now, let's go to the next one. Marco Rubio. This is what he says. Now we understand Russia better. After 3 years of silence, meaning the United States didn't have any relations with Russia or conversations. Russia is not going to seize all of Ukraine, and Ukraine will not be able to push them back to the positions of 2014. So if the U.S. mediated negotiations fail, Ukraine may find itself in a more awkward position in the future and receive tougher peace terms from the Russian Federation. What that is Rubio saying is, let's just capitulate and give up. Let's not fight. I don't understand why all of these people are cowards and do not want to stand up for what is right. They are cowards. We have war crimes. We have genocide. We have Russia trying to wipe Ukraine off the face of the planet, but it's not Russia's fault. Nobody is throwing any blame on Putin. It's all on you. It's all on Ukraine. Here you go. Here's Rubio.
Hopeful that we can get something done because this is a terrible war and it needs to end. Because it has no military solution. There is no military solution to this war. We have to be frank. Russia's not just going to roll over Ukraine and take the whole country, and Ukraine's not going to push them all the way back to where they were before 2014. So what I would say we're involved in is understanding what is the Russian position. We have a better understanding of that now because we've actually spoken to them after 3 years of not speaking to them. What is the Ukrainian position? And figure out, are these guys even in the same neighborhood? Because if they're in completely different zip codes, then we may have to conclude that they're so far apart that peace is impossible.
So there you have it. That is Marco Rubio giving his military analysis. And as I understand it, he never even served in the military. But that's neither here nor there. So I'm not sure he's the one to be talking about military solutions. Hey, this is just what we have. This is just what we have coming out of the United States, and it's absolutely a tragedy. JD Vance in India, where, by the way, India and Pakistan are both on high alert. We're getting ready potentially to look at a war between India and Pakistan. I mean, the world is on fire. And it's Donald Trump's fault. Period. Yes, Putin, other evil leaders. But my goodness, they have destroyed any semblance of order in this world since the beginning of this year and the inauguration. JD Vance saying, we have done so much work on the ground and trying to understand both perspectives, the Ukrainians and the Russians. Really? No, you haven't. Remember Zelenskyy asking you in the White House if you had ever been to Ukraine? And you went, no, but I've heard stories. Yeah, you heard stories from Witkoff that Putin told him. You heard stories from the Kremlin. We understand the Ukrainian perspective. You don't even understand anything, sir.
We've issued a very explicit proposal to both the Russians and the Ukrainians, and it's time for them to either say yes or for the United States to walk away from this process. We've engaged in an extraordinary amount of diplomacy, of on-the-ground work. We've really tried to understand things from the perspective of both the Ukrainians and the Russians. What do Ukrainians care the most about? What do the Russians care the most about? And I think that we've put together a very fair proposal. We're going to see if the Europeans, the Russians, and the Ukrainians are ultimately able to get this thing over the finish line. Again, I feel pretty optimistic about it. I think everybody has been negotiating in good faith, but it's now time, I think, to take, if not the final step, one of the final steps, which is at a broad level, the parties saying we're going to stop the killing, we're going to freeze the territorial lines at some level close to where they are today, and we're going to actually put in place the kind of long-term diplomatic settlement that hopefully will lead to long-term peace.
Yeah, we've just come up with a solution that works for everybody. Really. That means Ukraine loses everything. America gets mineral rights. Russia gets everything they want. And there's no security guarantees. Really? J.D. Vance, you're clueless, brother. Absolutely clueless. It's so sad. Yeah, of course, here we have this would be in the Hegseth family. This is Dmitry Medvedev, the former prime minister that went to be the president and gave Putin a break so he could rest up and ride horses with no shirts on. Dmitry Medvedev says Trump, Kyiv's refusal to recognize Crimea as Russian harms negotiations to resolve the conflict. So he's stating in this tweet, Kyiv's refusal that Trump said, Zelenskyy said no, to recognize Crimea as Russian harms negotiations to resolve the conflict. And then here's Medvedev's statement. We've been waiting. I hope different European freaks like Starmer and Macron will hear this. They did, and they said, not going to deal with the territory, it's Ukraine. And then the typhoid louse of Kyiv, who is in narcotic oblivion, will be brought to life. And that is his description of Vladimir Zelenskyy. Does the United States understand the vileness of these Russian leaders that they are negotiating with and working with and partnering with? Well, I guess they do, because that sounds like something Donald Trump would tweet out. Just spew it out there. So what happens next? I don't know. Right now we're seeing a lot of this. Trump, Putin, making Russia great again. Guys, there you have it. This is up to the minute update. You can see here, I'll keep you updated. Strikes continue. The drones doesn't stop. And neither do we. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being new subscribers. We're growing quickly, and that's because of you. Thank you for liking, dropping a comment, putting that notification bell on. It's 2:44 p.m. Eastern Standard Time as I'm recording this and uploading it. We'll be live in 3 hours tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern with Dylan Burns, and we will be going into this much, much deeper. Be blessed, and we'll be back at you in a few hours.